1–19, the creation of Volga Bulgaria in 1013, when Ghazi Yusuf, the Kakanbak of Khazar Bulgaria, died. Ibrahim Balthavar met the Uruz Kakan of Uruz Orishkul, Rus, Bulumar, Vachadimir Sviatoslavich, and agreed with him on the division of Khazar Bulgaria into two parts, the western Orishkul and the eastern or Ak Bulgaria. Danubian Bulgaria, Hungary, and Veliki Novgorod, having learned of this agreement, refused to submit to Rus and demanded to join Bulgar Isle, Volga Bulgaria. Ibrahim, not wishing to break the treaty with Vladimir, refused to accept these Bulgarian countries under his authority, and then each of them declared its independence. And so, in 1013, the Khazar Bulgarian Empire broke up into several independent states: Rus, Bulgar Isle, Ak Bulgar, or Volga Bulgaria, Hungary, Danubian Bulgaria, and Novgorod the Great. After the collapse of Khazar Bulgaria, Ak Bulgaria was in the most advantageous position, which included, in addition to Bulgar Isle, the whole of Siberia and the central regions of Khazar Bulgaria, the Pre-Caucasus, Jalda, the Lower Volga, which together with Kalgasuba, the eastern Black Sea, formed the Volga Bulgarian province of Saxon. Vladimir, who did not want the disintegration of Khazar Bulgaria and agreed to the partition only under pressure from Ibrahim, asked Ibrahim to compensate him for the loss of Novgorod the Great. Ibrahim immediately, in 1014, handed over Korczak, the future Muscovia, to him and promised to hand over in 1015 also Kara-Anja, the Volga River to the mouth of the river Sheksna at the mouth of the Ardoka. But in 1015 he was able to reach the Shok River. Vladimir died and Ibrahim withheld the surrender of Kara-Anja. It turned out that only Korczak began to give to Rus up to 1/3 of the income, and this stabilized the young state of the former Bulgarians, now Rus. Volga Bulgaria gave enormous economic aid to Suzdal, Korczak and Veliki Novgorod from 1013. It was divided into several ils, provinces, governorates, headed by Ulugbits, governors. The Ulugbits of the provinces of Sarshin, Mardin-Belak, Baygul, Western Siberia, or Ima, Iba, Moravia, Baituba, Pidovia, and Tubjak or Bujanak-Suba, Veding, were also called kings, and the remaining Ulugbits, emirs or Tarhans. By 1236, there were about 300 towns in Volga Bulgaria with a population of about 6 million people. In 1080, the first Bulgarian university O Mohammed Bakiria was opened in Bulia, whose rector became the eminent Bulgarian historian and Said Yaqub ibn Nugman, a descendant of Ahmed ibn Fadlan. And in the town of Ulug Bulgar, the only in the world, school for princes, founded by the Kakanbeka Talib Mumin, was active. The future rulers and nobles of most countries of the world were trained there. The noble students were grouped in a tens. One of the tens in the 1165 Szkolart for princes: 1. Prince Lachin of Poland, Lesko; 2. The Georgian Bek Bergen, the future Shota Rustaveli, author of The Tigress in Tiger's Skin; 3. The Merkit Prince Tokta; 4. The Chernigov Prince Bulumar, Vladimir Sviatoslavich, the author of Slovo Polku Igor Eve; 5. The Roman Bek Dizan, John, Tuki; 6. The Armenian Bek Pshrem; 7. The Azerbaijani Prince Sabi Ildijiz; 8. The Danubian Bulgarian Prince Kolajan, Kaloyan; 9. Egyptian Bek Asad Bulgari; 10. The Seljuk Bek Bulgardas. That number 10 of this group of eminent figures from all over the world was the Norman Prince Subosh, Sebastian, a student in the stream of the graduation. Almost all of them, having received a brilliant and comprehensive education, became poets, scholars, eminent generals, and statesmen. They received their practice in the course of tactics of field warfare in 1166 in the repulse of the brigands' breakthrough across the Bulgarian border at Mangishlak by the Oghuz Bey, an extreme Islamist Barangel, an agent of the House of Naden. The Chulman, Khan, Baranjas, even less well-armed than the Oghuz, surpassed the Oghuz in martial viciousness. Firing in Galan, with no less than 80% striking shots, the Baranjars faced the Barangel vanguard. The Oghuz Cunning Bull tried to flank the Baraninjas, but came under fire himself from an ambushing regiment that included the 100 students of the school for princes. Baringel, seeing the princes in the most costly armor in the world, thought he had been intercepted by the Bulgarian king himself, and spat on his heels. Several princes rushed after the Oghuz, but Tekin Bashi, head of the princes, the the school's director, Shodabek Ulush, ordered the Tens not to separate from the Baranjar line because of the dangers of ambushes. Shodabek headed the school for princes from 1153 to 1166 and was noted for his incredible strength and tall stature. One of his nephews, the poet and Ilkavite Abdi, Gabdullah Ulush, participated in the defeat of Igor Sviatoslavich's northern army in 1185, and the other, Shodi, named in his honor, heroically died with the rank of brigadier general at the liberation of Shurdag Sofia in 1187. Abdi's son, also Shodi, died in 1205 in Danubian Bulgaria in the battle with the Crusaders. To the descendants of Shodi belongs the great Bulgarian historian Daish Karachai al-Bulgari, author of the Volt Nariman Tari, 7591. 1-20. About the Tatars, I remember that Taham had a son Totai, with whom he used to come to me by ship to Serai with timber and slaves for the construction of the capital of the Kipchak horde. Once at his request I told him about the past of the Mongols, and he was very surprised that the Mashals called the Kipchaks and Turkmens to Tatars. How so? He asked. So the Tatars killed the father of the great Khan, and were massacred for it. After that they began to call every non-Mangili assemblage hired by the Mongols Tatars, and now Batu has commanded that the Turks loyal to him should be called by these words insulting to the Mongols. I replied to him that after the destruction of the Tatars the word Tatar had come to mean a mortal, perished, to the Mongols, and that Genghis Khan, on the conquest of Chin III, had quite naturally ordered that the mercenaries of the non-Mongols doomed to perish in battle should be called by that word. But at the partition of the empire of the great Khan, misunderstandings arose among his successors, and Batu, offended that they had given him the poorest lands, purposely ordered the other Khans to call their subjects by the word Tatar, hated by the Mongols. As for the Turks, for them the word Tatar means Mangud or mercenary of the Mongols. To this Taham replied, with great irritation, that with both the one and the other asses everything was in the wrong. 1-21, Chinggis Khan's true story. The wars of the Bulgarian kings with the Mongol Tatars for guarding and protecting the trade routes in Asia. The wars of the kings of Volga Bulgaria, aka Bulgar, for the protection of the Bulgarian trade routes in Asia are described as the First and Second Altai Wars. The First Altai War, in 1185, the brigand Yumran or Vlalugath was Genghis Khan's real name, carried out the villainous attack at the Jilki, Ashipka, river on the Bulgarian caravan of the Gorg Buliartai, son of Aktai. The caravan was moving from Sabantau, Tuva, to Chulim or Seraibalan, Saka, Yakutsk, along the old Chulim road. Its name comes from the old name of the town of Saruibalane, Chulim, Yakutsk. Iski Chulheim Ulai, Old Chulim Road, is a continuation of Burjat Ulai, Burjat Road, Bulgarian Road, which starts from Bulgar Kichi, the Bulgarian ferry carried across the Jake, Ural River. The Bulgarian and the Old Chulim roads were first mastered by the merchant from Jalda, Crimea, Hassan Azaki in 1135. Everyone assumed that he only reached Kozgin, but Hassan proved to be persistent and after many adventures he crossed from Kargali, around Orenburg, to Seraibalan, Yakutsk, and back in 15 months. He set out from Kargali in the month of Kichikerlag, February, in 1135 and arrived in the blessed Kargali in the month of Saban, April, 1136. Taking the largest stops, starting from Tozlai Bulgar, winter in Irkutsk region, he gave the Jaldi roadside towns and alls, and in that order they are set out in the book of Janti ibn Haqqani. In place of the largest stops thereafter arose fortified walled stations called towns. The Ulugbits, governors of Burjat, who were subordinate to the rulers of Bisu, Transbaikalia, Yakutia, and Urai, the Far East, became the Bets, princes of Kyrgyz Bulgar, Tuva. Their Bagliash, home, was located south of the Bulgar Ulai, but during the passage of the caravans the Ulf-Begs would skip north and accompany the caravans all the way from Kozgin to the border of Ar-Akitai, the Merkit Principality. In Ar-Akitai, which has always been the AK Andalus of AK Bulgar, our caravans were accompanied either by the rulers themselves or by their sons. The Ar-Akitai spoke both the Truk Bulgarian and Churlat, Mongolian, languages, but considered themselves pure Bulgarians and even called their capital Ara-Bulgar. Many Churlats not pronouncing the last R sound pronounced this name as Ara-Bulgad and Alabulgan, today Kyakhta. The Arakitai looked down on the Cherlats and were therefore detested by many of them. To the south and southwest of Arakitai, the land of the Merkites, lay the lands of the Kaimanian, Naiman, state, the Kakan of which was the young Dayan Kakan. The Kaimanians, Naimans, like the Arakitai, regarded themselves as pure Hun Bulgarians, and Dayan, like Takta, regarded himself as a descendant of Attila, Dinlin or Takta in the Cherlat language. Dayan himself, who loved his name after the Bulgarian similitude of Boyan, lived in the town of Boyanda, situated on a large plateau below the slopes of a mountain. In all, there were 29 towns in the Baglatia, the people of his theme of Dayan, 10 in the provinces of Kalgan, and 1 in the province of Chulak. Of the 5 provinces of Kaimanyote, Baglay was the richest and Chulak the poorest, centered on the city of Kadan. In the provinces of Kalgan, whose center is the town of Kalgan on the Kailen, Selenga, river, and in Chulak live Chulak Kaimans who have forgotten their Bulgarianness. In the provinces of Baglash and Kukjul are the real Bulgarian Kaimans. And in the provinces of Itbash are the Kirai, Karaites, sots of former Kaimanians, who recognize Buzdarism, Nestorianism, the Cherlats, Mongols, and the Taktars or Tatars, who are Akimen, Manjas, speaking their own language and the Truk Bulgarian language. The Itbash provinces were dominated by the Kirai, headed by the governor Shangan, Vankan, a friend of AK Bulgar. The majority of the Tatars, however, lived in their own Beylik at the sources of the Argun River and were Karaandashi, vassals of Chin, North China, as were the Shunguts, Onguts, living south of them. To the southwest of Kaiman were the possessions of the Karakitai, who were part of the Arakitai, but did not forget their Bulgarian origin. The Kakan of the Karakitai bore the honorific Bulgarian name of Kolian, and the son of the Kakan of the Arakitai Tota, Tuchi. Therefore, to distinguish them from each other, the Karakitai Kakan was simply called Kolin, and Tuchi was called Kara Kolin. In 1135, the Karakitai Kakan Burjan, the father of Aljan, and Zaga, the father of Takta, who were great friends, went together to the Emir Kolian and gave him an oath as the Akandashi of AK Bulgar. In memory of his unforgettable meeting with Kolin, Burjan named his son after him, and Zaga named his grandson Tujuan. Karakitai was divided into the following governorates: the northern, the Idgan, Seven-Tongue; the southern Kalak centered on Kasha, Kashkashan centered on Kash, Kucha, and Urtakashan centered on the town of Bulgarkashan; the central Ilek, populated by Karakitai and Kayagazi from the western Aryan Chinese district of Burut; the eastern Turakashan centered on the town of Turgan, Turfan. Kalak is inhabited by Abdalis, Kash is inhabited by Uyghur Muslims, and Urtakashan and Turakashan are inhabited mainly by Uyghur Ayuktsai, Buddhists. Of these, only the Abdul specify, they are Serai Bulgarians, White Bulgarians, and the Uyghurs are Kashan Bulgarians. This is a blessed Bulgarian country, abundant in beauties and cities. If Kaiman had 200,000 warriors, Karakitai had 300,000. To the southeast of Karakitai and south of Kaiman is the state of Tangut, second in power only to Chin in Seraihin. To the north of the Tatar Beylik was the Akimen, Manchurian, Beylik of Dor, bordered on the west by Arakitai and Kaiman, and on the east also by the Imen Beylik of Nankai, dependent as well as the Tatar Beylik of Chin. The Nankai dominions included both banks of the Great Amur River. Between the borders of AK Bulgar, running here, the far east, along the peaks of the Zia, and along the Uda River, flowing into the Sea of Okhotsk, and the northern border of Nankai, running along the Great Marsh, between Khabarovsk and the Amur, is a vast no-man's land. People coming from there say that many Alps, spirits, live in their land, which is why no one travels there. The names Zia, i.e. a snake river, or river curving like a snake, and Uda, i.e. a frontier river, are purely Bulgarian words, of which there are also many in Karaburgan, Danube Bulgaria, in Karabulgar, Ukraine, in AK Bulgar, Volga Bulgaria, and in Tash Bulgar, Caucasian Bulgaria. Kaimanian and Kara Chinese merchants sell our merchant superior Tangut swords, armor, cloth, and vessels. And the Nankai merchants leading into Dor and east of Chin sell our merchants fine Chin fabrics and vessels, Akimen quality clothing and shoes that are easy to travel within these places. With all this, they arrive at the appointed time at the rendezvous with the AK Bulgarian caravans in Ara China. For guides and guards of the Nankatsyk traders he welded the Taktars, whose name often changed to Tatars. The Taktars, once the most powerful Achaemenid tribe, were subordinate to Takta or Tota, i.e. to Attila, in memory of whom they took to calling themselves Taktars, i.e. Attila's people. From the time when they served Attila, the Taktars wore Bulgarian clothing and could speak the Turk-Bulgarian, Turco-Bulgarian, Bulgarian-Turkic language. The merchant Bulgartai was accompanied by Takta himself with 10 bejas and 1,000 warriors. As they were about to cross the Jilki River, thousands of Yumrans, Genghis Khans, Churlats, Mongols, jumped out of an ambush and attacked the caravan. 500 AK Bulgarians and 1,000 AR Akitai managed to save only a third of the caravan's possessions, losing 100 AK Bulgarians and 400 AR Akitai. The Churlats, who lost 3,000 men and managed to steal 2/3 of the caravan's cargo and pack animals, Yumran was wounded and hid in a mountain covered with impassable vegetation. In the fierce skirmish, Takta managed to save the merchant Bulgartai himself. Leaving their shelter, as befitted this mountain, the AR Akitai retreated with the rest of the caravan to AR Bulgar. This happened in August 1185, and in January 1186 the case was reported to Gabdullah Chelbir, king of Volga Bulgaria, 1178–1225. The king urgently sent Taktra's friend, Habir Bukharai, to the east as a Tujuan, deputy envoy, of Sarai Bulgaria. Together with Habir Bukharai, 5,000 Chulman Bajars of Bikan, 10,000 Mardan Belak militiamen of Hagaruglaj and 5,000 Bashkorts of Ishtik went to Ara Bulgar. On hearing of the arrival of the AK Bulgarian army, the neighbors were greatly excited. In order not to offend Dayan Kakan, Habir Bukharai did not arrive directly at the scene of the accident in Ara Kitai, but passed along the Kozgin road to the border of the Kukjul province of Kame. At the frontier he was cordially received by the governor Tashandi, whom they also called only Kukjul, who took him into the interior of Kaiman. At one of the crossings, the young Kanjali or Kunrad B. Bugu, i.e. Bulgar, came out to meet them and reported the following in Kaimanian to Tanshandi. Some Kaimanian grandee had hired him with 3,000 other Kara-Chinese Kyrgyz to attack the AK Bulgarians. He did not want to do it himself, but his father forced him to do it, and then he decided to foil this villainous plan. Setting out from the robber ambush on a reconnaissance, he came to Tanshandi with the warning of the impending attack. This assault was to create disturbances in Kaiman and Karakitai and allow the unknown warlord to seize the Kakan throne. They approached the scene of the ambush, and Bugu suggested to the Kyrgyz that they should not sully themselves by the disgraceful deed and should voluntarily surrender to the governor of Kukjul, the SZ Kyrgyz. The majority of the KYRGYZ heeded this advice and, having dealt with the conspirators among them, surrendered to Kukjul. The contented Tanshandi offered them to go into his service, and they gladly consented. When Dayan's nephew, Kuchluk, who, it is not known why, did not meet them earlier at the border between Kukjak and Baglush, arrived with them, Tanshandi ordered the conspirators to betray the person who had ordered the crime. Tanshandi showed by this to Kuchluk that he had been exposed, and all saw the prince turn pale and take pity. However, the experienced Kukjul did not intend to hurry with his denunciation before Kokon Dayan, for by exposing Kuchluk he would unwittingly cast a shadow over the emperor himself. Tanshande only wanted to achieve influence over the treacherous Kuchluk, and this he succeeded in doing completely. When the troublemakers refused to surrender the charge of Kuchluk, Kukjul told Kuchluk, "If you refuse to accept the Kakan's offer of bestowing upon you the title of coadjutor, you may come to me and personally execute these troublemakers." Kuchluk accepted this deal and refused to accept the title of coadjutor, telling the Kakan, "I was unforgivably late in welcoming the AK Bulgarian envoy, and in doing so I showed that I am still too young to accept the responsible title of coadjutor." Everyone in the state, beginning with the Kakan and ending with Kukjul, was pleased with this turn of events, and the troublemakers were killed and took their secret to hell. During the stay on the shores of the beautiful Lake Tankiel, heavenly, Paradise Lake, in western Mongolia, the Ulug Kakan, Emperor, Dayan himself arrived at the camp of the Bahadirs, Kukjul and Habir Bukharai, in an extremely high spirits. It appeared that due to his intervention, the situation quickly returned to normal. The governor of Itbash, Jan Hakan, a sincere friend of AK Bulgar, as well as the emperor himself, crushed his nod-wielding tuber of the Churlat Bey Altin, and so it fell to him, with the help of Yumran's clan, the Genghis, to arrest and hand over all those involved in the attack on AK Bulgar's caravan. Because of this, Jan Hakan did not bring Altin to justice, but deposed him from the post of Inal, governor of the cantonment, and installed in his place the vipest of the school for princes, the brave Bahadur and storyteller Jamak. All that we narrate, writes Galim the Younger, we have drawn it from the works of Kart Galim, Old Galim, and Kul Galim, and the song of Jamak and his son Altinchek. The cursed Altinchek was beheaded on the orders of the vengeful Yumran and ordered to glorify his executioner, but he did not stop singing. In the same situation fell the Chin, Chinese, nobleman Alai Iluichutsai, who, in exchange for his life and office, wrote so false a story about the Churlats. Indeed, Alari was not a stiff. Before the punishment, Yumran got drunk, fell into a mild mood and exempted Alari from this cruel punishment. These Alari and Altinchek compiled the body of laws on the basis of the Torah, Retina, of Attila operating in Naaman, added to it the nonsense of Yumran and of a shaman who was killed by Yumran, and called the whole mixture the laws of Yumran, Genghis Khan. Then, in order that the law might be observed, they arrested Yumran and delivered him into the hands of Buliartai, and Buliartai wished that this criminal should languish locked up in Kukchal province under the supervision of Tashandai. Yumran spent 10 years in prison. Kulgoli in the Konkitabi quotes the Kukchal in how he had held Khan Timer, Genghis Khan, captive. It turned out that Timer was very cowardly and very afraid of pain. Once the Inal decided to scourge him for his negligence, but the Goy, foreseeing his intention, threw himself at his feet, kissed his shoes and begged his forgiveness. In 1196, at the request of the Qin emperor, the emperor of Karakitai asked Hakan Dayan to release Yumran. Dayan, out of respect for Colin Aljan, persuaded Tashandai to release Yumran. The Qin needed Yumran as a bloodthirsty and ruthless mercenary. Yumran completely paid off the Qins by fighting for 2 years against the independent Tartari Bulai of his Beylik and against the Artus, Koreans. After his arrest, the Ulusha municipality demanded a large sum of money from Yumran for the damage he had done, and sent him to the semi-deserted place of the Shungut, Ongut, subordinate to China, Beylik, where he did not have it easy. And even before his arrest, Yumran managed to befriend Jamak in the presence of his mother, and he, who feared for the lives of Yumran's mother and wife, left them with him. For this purpose he had to marry both of them. With Yumran's wife Jamak went to Bulgar, where he presented himself to Gabadullah Chelbir. In 1198, Jamak, at the request of Yumran's mother, went out to ask permission to return to the criminal's Ulusha, only not on the Onaga, Orkhon, river, but on the banks of the Argine, Argon. And in the same year here returned the pretended, repentant, supposedly decent Yumran. The real liberator of Yumran, the governor of the Kara Chinese province of Turakashan, Elias, then not yet revealed himself, was the Kara Ustai, emissary of the Labate house of the Nadans. His daughter was married to Yumran, for he had long looked upon him as a useful man to the Labuitans. It was Elias who suggested to the Qin that only Yumran could help them to subdue both the Tartars and the Arthurs again. As soon as Yumran reappeared in Kaiman, Elias' men, under the guise of Muslim traders, appeared to him and conveyed his words: "If you agree to subdue the Bulgarian trade routes from Sula, Dunor, to the Imen, Tihia, Ocean to house Naden, Clan Naden, and protect them, I will make you rich and powerful." Already convinced of Elias's immense capabilities, Yumran agreed to serve House Naden and adopted the Judeans' favorite name Daud, David, which the Churlats pronounced as Tamad and Tamujan. Jin here is the isoproper Jan that Agbashaka, Asian, Muslims add to every name. Indeed, even Jan, soul, man, is converted in the case of the Labates into Jin, oratorical force, devil. Elias at once handed over to Tamujan a large sum of money, with which he made the beer of Dor Kubul and the governor of Kalgan and Kedan his allies. The chief obstacle in Tamujan's path to glory was the Kakan Togrol, whose Christian name was Jan Ivan. The incorruptible friend of the Bulgarians, Jan Hakan had only one weakness, his boundless love for his son Sonj, and this weakness Yumran exploited masterfully. In the beginning, by hinting to Sonj Jamak's words, Sonj is not only illiterate, but also unwilling to learn anything, Temujin turned Sonj into Jamuk's mortal enemy. Then, in 1199, when the Burjigin and Taikai clans were outraged by the inept rule of the Sonjin, and Jamuk refused to come to Sonj's aid, Yumran helped the son of Janharkan to put down the rebellion. In doing so, Yumran slaughtered thousands of innocent Kaimanian Taktars whose lands he had long wished to appropriate, as well as many Taikai and Burjigini. Then half the Taikai and Burjigini fled to Ara Kitai, and the surviving Tatars to the Tatar, Beylik of Bulai. Sonj, overwhelmed by Temujin's flattery, believed this goat herd to be his best friend, and in 1200 succeeded in getting his father to depose Jamuk for inaction and appoint Yumran in his place. On the throne being placed on the inal of the tyrant Kalangikalat, Temujin purposely assumed the purely English name Taima, i.e. heavenly. Yumran purposely adopted this purely Bulgarian name to please Janharkana, who loved everything Bulgarian. The simple-minded people did not distinguish Taima from Taima, Karat Kellerson. Moreover, the word Taima was derived from Taima, and for this reason very soon Temujin began to call him Taima. Jamuk refused to obey Yumran and took the title Korgan, which in Bulgarians meant peoples, Kor, ruler, Khan, Gan. At the same time, both Dayanharkan and Taktaharkan expressed their concern at Yumran's appointment to the high post of Inal. All this led Jankakan to doubt, and when Sonj took it upon himself to persuade him to help Yumran to defeat the mutinous Jamuk, he said, "Let them decide for themselves in a duel which of the two is the stronger, and disempower each other." In 1201, Jamuk, after receiving help from Takht, attacked the capital of Yumran at Mukhali and defeated Temujin completely. Tatar's son, Tuchi, shot the horse under Yumran and wounded Taima himself, but the ch in armor saved Temujin. Yumran's orderly, the insatiable Jalma, managed to lift him onto his spare horse and spur him towards the border with the door. Intoxicated by the easy victory, Jamuk, heedless of Tukchi's warnings, took after Yumran's fleeing men and fell into the ambush of Bij Kubal, who came to Temujin's rescue. Jamuk's men were now utterly routed, and only half of them were able to escape from the encirclement, thanks to the shelter of the sinewy Ara Chinese braves. Tukchi helped Jamuk to reach the Arkon tube, basically on the right bank of the Orkhon River, bypassing the Sonj Onaga tube, the upper reaches of the Orkhon, and there Jamuk was able to justify himself to Janharkan. But the post of Inal of Kalangikalat remained for Temujin. In 1202 Jumran, ostensibly in the service of the Chins, attacked the Tartai Beylik with the doors and ruthlessly slaughtered all the Tatars, Chnamapu. Dying under the blows of the Churlat and Dor swords, Bulai bitterly regretted not accepting Jamuk's offer of a joint attack on Yumran. After this victory, the Churlats of Taima began to call themselves Tatars because the word Targa was pronounced by the Churlats as Tatar. Immediately after this defeat, Yumran invited Jankakan to come to him at Mukhali and take his share of the huge booty that had fallen to him, for he was unable to bring it to Arkon himself. With an army of 20,000 Itbashi, Janharkan and Sonj left for Mukhali. On the march to that capital, Yumran's son, Ugitai, handed over a large quantity of food and drink to the Kakan governor. The weary warriors of Jan, savoring the distribution of the rich booty, were fed and drunk out of their wits. In the midst of this feast, 100,000 Churlat Tatars, Mongol Tatars, and Dors attacked the governor's men and slaughtered them. Janharkan and Sonj fell in the fight along with 5,000 sober Onagiri, who were governed in the preservation of their Bulgarianness by the Berlasai family. All the remaining Itbashi bid farewell to life in their sleep. Only Jamuk's detachment, which was in the rearguard, escaped. Yumran ordered the bodies of the governor and his son to be buried secretly, and spread the rumor of the escape of Jong and Sonj after their unexpected attack with 20,000 Churlat Tatars. Yumran reported to Dayanharkan that Jong and Sonj had unexpectedly and unprovokedly attacked him, and his men, saving their lives, were forced to engage them in battle. Yumran's secret associates, governors Kalgan and Kamran, confirmed this information. These conspirators advised the Elf Kakan to appoint as the new governor of Ithbash the impeccable Kirian, Karaiti. In Al-Talian the Kinians were fond of so calling Atil himself. Alas, this Talyang turned out to be a secret accomplice of Yumran, and under his cover Temujin commanded the governorate of Itbash for 2 years. During this time he succeeded in seducing and bribing the majority of the Itbashaki Bai, and Kalgan and Kadan, with funds from Yumran, bribed their Kaimanian Bai. It was only after this that Tata reported to Dayan that hundreds of Itbashis were fleeing to him and telling of Yumran's preparations for war with the Cayman Kakanat Talian's undue condescension. Dayan marched to Itbash with 30,000 fighters because he believed the rumors of 20,000 Yumran warriors and believed that this number of men would be enough to bring order to the Itbash governorate. Dayan's army was composed of 5,000 warriors of Kuchluk, whom Elias had enlisted in the service of the House of Naden even before Yumran with the promise of the Kaimanian throne, 10,000 warriors of Kalkan, 10,000 warriors of Kadan, and only 5,000 warriors loyal to Ulugh Hakan from the two northern tubas in Baglash Boyana and Bahrain. At the request of the scoundrel Kuchluk, Dayan refused help not only from the Kakan Takta but also from his governor of Tashandeh Kukjul. Kuchluk presented his request thus: "I wish to make an attempt to distinguish myself before you and show that I am your able disciple, and Tata and Kukjul out of dislike for me may fail in this attempt or challenge my victory." Even if they now appear opposites, Dayan granted Kuchluk's request, but in vain, as it turned out. When Dayan Hakan came out of Baglash with Jamak and Kuchluk, he was immediately joined with feigned devotion by Kalgan Zarji, the blacksmith, with his sons Chelm, the leper, Chelm, Subgatai, the man, Tai Gaga Subgaji, and Sergei, Kadan with his sons Jeeb and Norbri. Together they passed through the old capital of Kaiman, Karakarayim, the Arkon, Orkhan, river and proceeded to the Kukjulosu, Tolar, river. When the Yumran army of 30,000 Cherlats and 50,000 Dor, Manchurians, of Kubul began to approach Dayan's army from the south, the Tumen of Kalgan and Kadan crossed over to the enemy's side and jointly surrounded Dayan Kakan's camp. When Kuchluk, trembling with fear, appeared in Dayan's tent, and in a choking voice acquainted him with the desperate situation, the old Ulugh Hakan smiled and said, "My people will hold out for 2 days, after which the remainder of my life will naturally expire without any interference from the traitors. As soon as I die, and I have dreamed of dying such a death in war and on the march, Jamak will dress me in the ordinary dress of a soldier and strip the skin from my face so that the enemy cannot find my corpse. Then you will go with Jamak and the majority of the Cow Bulgarians, Caymanians, Neme, after a breakthrough to the north, where Tota will be waiting for you on the banks of the Arkon. By my secret command, as soon as my army assembled at Karakoram, Tota took possession of the lands north of the Kalgan to the middle Arkon, and Kukjul the whole of Baglash, and if you do not appear before them with my skin and without Jamak or his skin, and give them these words of mine verbatim, they will strip your skin from you alive." Everything happened as Dayan Hakan had said. When Kuchluk slipped out of the camp with Jamak, conveyed these words to Tota, and handed him the skin from the old Hakan's face, Tota wept. These were the only tears of the Kakan of the Ara Bulgarians or Ara Chinese that his people saw. Through the towns of Kalgan and Uran, Tota led Jamak and Kuchluk to Baglash. There, Kukjul ordered them to defend the city and the Tuba of Bahrain. Because he had a bad feeling, Takta asked Chelbia to concentrate one of the Bulgarian armies in Serai Hin, the Great Hin, Altai, Mongolia, China, Korea. In spite of the war with the Karatan, Crusaders, in Agil, Balkans, with the mutinous Turkmen of Baran in Menkashlak, Mangilag, and with the rebellious Kyrgyz of Alash in Serai Tuba of Tubjak, Bishgar province in Kazakhstan, Chelbia sent to the border with Kukjul the new AK Bulgarian Tujuan, ambassador deputy of the East Emir Tatra with 10,000 Chulman, Kam, Baranjars of Belek Emir, 10,000 Mardan Balaks of Hagaragle and 10,000 Saxons of Bokman. Both Belek Emir and Hagaraglu and Bokman were students of Tatra, and to participate in a campaign with their teacher was a great honor for them. After they set out in late 1204, they arrived in Jambulag, the area of the Emba River, and in the first encounter, they subdued 10,000 Turkmen Karakashtu, extreme Ismailis cooperating with the Labate of House Naden. Baran was stationed in Jambulag, as in his own district, and without looking around he rushed to flee to Karajim, Kharezm. Ordering the dispatch of Barat Khan Liayon, having borne the brunt of the war with Baran, Tatra led his army back to the Chirukala military base of Bulgarilek, today the city of Aktob in Kazakhstan. From here, after a brief respite, Tatra's army marched to the border with Kaiman along the Bulgarilek military road. The eastern part of this road, the Barin Road between Akmula, Akmalinsk, and the Chirukala in Barin, Barnaul, has two branches, the northern one, passing through the Chirukala Bulgaryutrau, Long Island, Pavloda in Kazakhstan, and the southern one, passing through the Chirukala Kukdoria, on the Nura River, Tadkuakbash or Uyaguz, Uyghurs, Kazakhstan, and Aulidar, Semipalatinsk. From Akmula, the army of Tatra went to Uyaguz to the aid of 15,000 fighters of the Irma army of Boyon Julo, who had been at war with the rebel Alashar since 1204. Alashar, the brother of the good Inal of Seraituba, Qasim, gathered around him in Saban, the eastern part of Seraituba, all the disaffected, and began to demand independence. Chelbir could not possibly concede Saban, through which the most important roads to the east and south passed, to him, and he therefore, with the consent of Qasim and the then governor of Tubjak Merjan or Kart Merjan, Old Merjan, offered to Alashar the western part of Seraituba. Alashar refused this exchange, and it was at once clear to all that he was a malignant enemy of AK Bulgar, for the western part of Seraituba was much richer than the eastern, and was a costly gift to the common seekers of wealth and fame. Javashgar Haga, who exposed the activities of the Labuit House of Naden in conquering the Bulgarian trade routes, quickly detected Alashar's connections with the Karakashtu and with the Labuit of Karajim, Kharezm, and Alashar was outlawed. Alashar burned the Chirukal of Idea, Semipalatinsk, with fury, but this was his last success. The Ermat of Boyon Julo, son of the governor of the Bulgarian province of Bisu, eastern Siberia and the Far East, Shieska Sperle, who had arrived in Idea urgently by order of Chelbir, in a fierce massacre forced 50,000 Kangli or Kangars to surrender to Alashar and began to press them step by step towards Kuakbash. Qasim with his Buluk struck at the retreating rebels from outside the city, but they defeated the Inal, i.e. Qasim, and destroyed the unfortified city. Qasim with his Buluk retreated along the Altai road to the capital of his Tuba, Seraiba Lake, the Jezkazgan-Baykana area. Already in the Aula of Tuay, Tatra was joined with his Buluk by the famous Kilik, son of the Inal of the Tuba of Karijim, Tiriai. In addition to 5,000 armed men, as was proper, he brought 2,000 horsemen armed only with Uri, pitchforks. When Governor Merjan, Tijai's best friend who had accompanied him constantly since Jake, asked Kilik why he had brought Sanakis, villagers with a villa, he explained, in Karijim, because of the harsh conditions, many people have sold their weapons and cannot even pay ransom for their brides. Many AK Bulgarians had their jaws hanging open in astonishment, but Tatra unmovedly said, "We are short of men, so I am taking unarmed Taraklians and, in order not to break the law, enrolling them in the stable." During the brief respite, a Barajar took to taunting a Taraklin, and he proposed a duel with the Barajar, he with a saber and the Taraklin with a horn. In the skirmish the Taraklinite, in front of the whole army, threw the terrible Baranjar off his horse and pinned him down to the ground by the neck with the horn. On hearing of the approach of the army of Tatra, whom he feared in panic for his intransigence, Alashar quickly seized the road from Quakbash to the west. About 30,000 of his men surrendered to the Bulgars below Kuakbash, another 10,000 were captured in ambushes by the Seraitubins and Karajims on the shores of Lake Bulgarian, Balkhash, and the Kicha Bulgarian Sea. Only 7,000 of Alashar's rebels managed to escape to Kurgan, Transcaspian, where he joined with the warriors of Baran, also defeated by Tatra. From this war the happy victors of the Taraklians returned with trophy weapons and rich booty, as well as with crowds of captured women. From that time among the Bulgarians began the tales, the Seraitubins are brave until the moment they see a Taraklin with a horn, the Baranjar is brave, but the Taraklin is hunter, all from war carry wounds. But the Taraklinians have riches and women, in times of trouble all take the sword, but the Taraklinians the horns, any fool can fight with arms, but let him try without arms, like Kilik and his Taraklinians. At the Kurultai, a military council, in Quakbash, the whole truth about Kaiman's situation was revealed and decisions were made about further action. At the beginning of 1205 Yumran suddenly attacked simultaneously the positions of Tota and Kuchluk. Tota began a retreat to Barwin with Tochi's young son, Chilwan, Jlamoke, who had studied in 1183 and 1184 at the school for princes along with Yumran's eldest son, Juchi. Chilwan, who was 5 years older than Juche and then a full 13 years old, mentored Juche and became his older brother for life. Because of this, Yumran did not bring Juche into this operation and entrusted the command of the Bulwans to Jagatai and Ugatai, his other sons. Subgatai, whom ours called Subiatai and Sergei, turned Kuchluk into flight and destroyed the whole defense. After Kuchluk, Tota with Chilwan and Jamak began to retreat. On learning of this, Kukchul removed half the population of Baglash to his northern province of Kukchul and stationed himself behind Lake Arabulgar, Kororusna in Mongolia, covering the road from Baglash to Kukchul. The retreating troops passed through the Arabulgar Pass over the Kayman Range, Mongolian Altai, and found themselves in the Arabulgar district. This area was considered to be theirs by both Kayman and Karakitai, but was ruled by a Kayman viceroy. Yumran, having sent after the retreating Subiatai with 20,000 Itbashis and 30,000 Tatars, Mongops, halted at the Arabulgar Pass with 60,000 Tatars and Dor to oversee Kukchul, with the Ilchabek, regent of Kayman at the minor Kayman Kakan Bulgar, the son of Dayan Kakan's sister. Bulgar in Qing, Chinese, is Bugu or Baloch, hence Popovets, and in Tatar is Bulgan or Ungir. That is why the river Bulgasan, Itish, is also called Bugasan, being beyond Kaimantau, Mongolian Altai. Subiai decided to attack the army of Tatra on his own, but Koklai Norbri, the father of Tabanga, advised him to give up. Therefore, the attack was led by Subiatai's eternal rival, Sergei. On seeing Seriyai, Tota, the vicious enemy of the Ara Kitai, rushed to meet him but was killed with the first blow. Chilwan tried to drag his father's body out of the center of the fray, but seeing that this was impossible, he chopped off his head and got away with it. Then ours had already completed their formation, and rushed upon the Tatars like an impenetrable wall. In the midst of the fierce slashing, Kuchluk fled from the battlefield to the Karakitai, whose camp was on the Yamalchue, now the Emel River in Kazakhstan and China. The good Kakan Kolin Aljan adopted Kuchluk as his son, and he, at the instigation of the Labatans, destroyed the Kara Chinese state. As the moment happened, he stole the rations of the Kara Chinese soldiers, and they, not having received their money for their service, took to plundering everything around. After Kuchluk's escape we had a rough time of it, but Tathra struck just in time from an ambush with the Baranjars, and turned the advance regiment of the Sergei into flight. Not expecting this, the Tatars turned in panic flight and ours had only to catch up with the fleeing Tatars and cut them down. In this battle, while killing 45,000 Tatars, we lost 10,000 AK Bulgarians and 10,000 Ara Bulgarians, Harakitai, Merkites. Chilwan Tukchi wanted to go after Subiatai, who fled along the Ara Bulgarian pass to Yumran, but Tatra stopped him. After setting up an impregnable camp on the hill, our people, together with the Ara Bulgarians, collected booty for 2 days, which was divided among the Kukjaks, Ara Bulgarians, and AK Bulgarians. Hakan Kolian for a part of the booty sent to ours the inn of the Kara Chinese Tuba Yamal with 5,000 Chumaks, peasants, and they helped to bury the dead. Tatra was confident that Yumran would resort to negotiation, for his sons Jagatai and Ugatai, and also the wounded Sirai, were taken prisoners. Jagatai was captured by Hagaragle, who killed his horse. Ugatai was caught in a snare by Bokman, and Sergei was pinned to the ground by Kilik's brawny son, Zabir. After 10 days Juche approached the camp and invited Tathra to negotiate with Yumran. Leaving Belekamir as his deputy, Tatra set out with Juche along the Ara Bulgarian pass to Yumran's camp. Yumran, or as he now called himself, Kakan Taima, received Emir Tatra very cordially. And it must be said that Taima had a tremendous influence over the people, and whole armies were prepared to die for him to the last man just for a nod of the head. So when Taima wanted to be liked, there was no nicer person than him. But as he stepped into Tima's yurt, at the very entrance, Tathra saw Subiatai chained in a thong. His pitiful appearance spoke of Taima's other quality, ruthless cruelty to achieve power and might. At the luncheon in honor of Tathra's day, Taima raised a toast to Great Bulgaria and its valiant guardians, the Ulug Kakana, Great Kargan, Emperor, Chelbir and his mighty Bahadirs. In response, Tatra diplomatically raised a toast to Kakan Taima, the son of the great leader of the core people of Hin, here Mongolia, Idzik, Isajay. At these words, Timer's cheeks turned slightly pink and his eyes shone, evidently enjoying this toast. Tatra afterwards told me, writes the old Gallim, that Timer had at heart the common warriors, ready to execute without reflection every order of their ruler, and therefore the Khakan, Genghis Khan, felt disposed towards him. Timer said that Juche had often told him of his favorite tutor at that school for princes, the Tatra, and that he thought his son had somewhat exaggerated the emir's valor and wit, but that he now saw clearly that the glowing characterization given by Juche of the Tatra was true to reality. In his desire to dismiss from himself the slanders of envious men, Timur explained that the unfortunate attack on the Bulgarian caravan was made not from base motives or hatred of the Bulgarians, countrymen of the people of Hin, but because of his marriage with the daughter of the Hun Altin. To attack merchants and steal animals from our neighbors is considered heroic, and I wanted to show this heroism and get riches to buy the bride to take the daughter of Altai, said Timur. Then he disclosed that he loved and regarded Janharkan as his father, and that he had attacked him without cause, and he had only defended himself. And Janharkan attacked me without cause, added Timer. Because the Itbash people themselves elect their governor from among the Unals, governors, and are not appointed by the Ulug Harkans, and Dayan had no right to depose me, the legally elected governor of Itbash by the Itbash people. In the midst of the conversation, a messenger arrived from Juche's Aul, Hun Dulo, now Ulaanbaatar, to announce the birth of Juche's first son. The joyful Timer asked the Tatra to name the firstborn, and the emir gave the newly born son the name of his father, Balak. Balak, white or sacred fish, in Churlat, Mongolian, is pronounced Batay, and so they began to call Juche's big son, from Batay, Barty. The name-calling made Tatra a close relative of Timer and Juche, and proceeding directly to negotiations, the cunning Yumran did not fail to remind the emir of this. For Great Bulgaria, by treaty, remained the province of Kukchul and Boyanu, the northeastern part of Baglush, and also Uran, the northern part of the province of Kalgan, through which the Kozin road passed into Kitai, and the rest of Baglush was proclaimed as the Kingdom of Juche. The new Khakan of Kitai, Tuchi, recognized himself as the Karahandash of Greater Bulgaria, and Tashandeh, the ruler of Kukchul, Boyanu and Uran, was appointed by Tatra as the Inal of the Tubjak Tuba Saban, just founded especially for him, with Kukbasa as its center. Both Tukchi and Kukchul were given personal titles of emir by Chelbia, which enabled them to arm 1,000 of their warriors on a budgetary allowance with Unrili. The participants in the negotiations expressed joy at the peace treaty, but it did not escape me that Timer refused to include in it a clause of non-aggression against the ally of Great Bulgaria, Tangut. I asked Tatra if we could defeat Timur completely. The emir replied, "We could, but at the cost of the death of our entire army, the best in Great Bulgaria. And in so doing we would have opened the field of Hin to another predator, the Akmeni Kubal, who had joined the door in the twice as large Tatar Beylik, and we would have left Bulgar without our indispensable help in the event of Karajim, Korgumian, aggression." Incidentally, an attack by the Karajim against Bulgar might have taken place at any moment, as Baron's captive son told me on interrogation. Behind the Turkmen, a 200,000-strong army of Karajim had prepared for war against the Bulgars. At these words I understood that Tatra was not only a great warrior but a great diplomatist, and that I was quite ignorant of politics. Having asked Tukchi and Kukchul to spread the rumor of the removal of Tatra's army to Echka Bulgar, Zakamite, the emir took the army to Bahrain, Barnaul, and set about strengthening the position of Tashandeh in Sabantuba. Tatra suspected Yumran of treachery and was not wrong. On receiving from his scouts the message of the withdrawal of Tatra's army, Timer ordered his own to prepare for war with Tangut and Kitai. This was after Tatra warned Timer, an attack on Kitai and Tangut would mean an attack on Great Bulgaria. And that's it for the First Altai War. NT 4, 308 to 328. The Second Altai War, the War of the Gorg and the Duck, began in 1207. Timer, having received during this time another name, Jongais, heavenly or son of heaven, and hence a corruption of Genghis, and the Khan, king, emperor, title of Khan, and so Genghis Khan sent Jib to Tangut, and Subute, the Gargat, to take Kitai. Both were gaining military experience. Subiatai was especially diligent and miraculously escaped his doom thanks to Tatra freeing Sergei and the sons of Yumran from captivity after they swore not to fight against Great Bulgaria again. Interestingly, the playful Jagatai, who was serious about oaths, did not break the promise, but the frivolous Ugatai broke it, but out of fear began to get drunk. And drunkenness drove him to the grave, such was God's judgment on them for breaking an oath. And how the other oath-breaker, Syria, was punished by heaven will be known later. Together with Subiatai, his uncle Mangush of the Kotlumas family set out for Ara Kitai. This is a famous Kaimanian family. The Kaimanians, or Korbui for short, Kowui in Russian annals, descended from the most powerful Hun tribe, the Turiangi or Turiangai, a name sometimes mispronounced as Urian Hai. In Europe the Turiangi are called Turingi. Even the most prominent Honi, the Utig and Marangi, in Europe the Utig are called Franks, and from them comes France, were inferior in strength to the cowboys. After the Turiangs and Marangs, from whom the Avars descended, separating from the rest of the Marangs about 3,000 years ago, followed in power the Saxons or Saxons. In Europe they gave rise to the German Saxon people and to the southern Volga Bulgarian tribe Sarshin. After them the Kangles or Kantars, who are also called Angles, from them comes the name England, and the Arnagas, Alans, and others. From the Arnagas more than 6,000 years ago descended the Samar, Sumerian, Bulgars and Cimmerians, the Kubars or Kuba Bulgarians, by Bulgarians from Armenian sources, who settled on the Kubanesh River, southern Bug. It is known to us that the Marangi are descended from the most ancient Bulgarian tribe, the Boyandri, Peoni from the Greek sources, or Kunduri, from whom the Baranjari or Burjani. In Western Europe they are called Burgundians, and the Hagiari descended, who are often called Khazars and Karji, Kothians by Herodotus, and that from the Alans descended the Bulgarians Tseberi or Suvari, who are also called Sabani, Iraqi or Iraqi, Katragi, i.e. Kudiraki, Bajanaki, Pechenegs. The son of Katulmas was Kara Mars, his son Aslan Mars, his son Bibaris, who had two famous sons, Mangush and Karas, and a daughter married to Kalgan, who gave birth to Subiatai and Chelm. Mangush was the father of Kildan, and Karas the father of Arbuji and Kutlubuji, the first Bashkak of Ulug Bulgar, Great Bulgar. The Ara Kitai were also cowboys in origin, but unlike the other Kaimans, they mixed heavily with the Churlats, Mongols, and adopted the Churlat speech as their second language. In both the Kaimanian state and the Taima state, which existed on the basis of Kaimanian traditions and institutions, the official language was Truk Bulgarian, Turkic Bulgarian, without a single Churlat word. Only after Taima's death, his son Ugitai decreed that Churlat language be considered the second state language of Altai, here Genghis Khan's empire, after Truk Bulgarian. This reform caused so much dissatisfaction that most of the inhabitants of Altai, modern Mongolia, began to say, "It does not suit Altai." At first it was Taima, now it is Telma, Cosmo speaking, i.e., Ugitai Ugade. Only after he had expelled half or even most of the Kaimans from Altai and after he had settled Churlats in their place did Ugitai succeed in carrying out his reform. And the word Mars in the meaning of lord, governor, senior is still used, late medieval times, by the Bulgarians in Mardan Belak, as well as some other Bulgarians of the Bajanaks. Subiatai and Mangush had scarcely begun to burn the Ara Chinese land, when Kakan Chilwan called to his aid the ever-ready army of Tatra. Learning of the approach of the army of Tatra, Mangush occupied the Kaiman section of the Kozgin Road and Kukchal and began with his 30,000 Kaimans and Itbashis to fight the AK Bulgarians bitterly for every ravine and hill. The cunning and knowledgeable Mangush avoided clashes with the large detachments of the AK Bulgarians, hung about, appeared unexpectedly and disappeared, ambushed and prevented ours, writes old Galim, who served in the army of Tatra, from entering Baglash for 2 years, 1207 to 1208. And this in view of the fact that we were splendidly armed and Juchi had nothing to support either Mangush or Subiatai. It was only in 1209, when the Kakana of Tangut Burjan sent a desperate cry for help to Tathra, that Tathra was able to overpower Mangush. On the Bugatorma River, Bakhtama, Bulgarian Stormy River, the Emir, with Karakitai villagers hired on his arm, erected a huge and deliberately poorly fortified camp and packed it with cargo and supplies. At some distance from the camp in the forest, the Tatra hid 10,000 soldiers, whom he forbade to light fires and ordered to attack the enemy in case of their attack on the Tabaira camp. Mangush, going about not far away, decided that the greater part of the army of the Tatra had departed, and only a small part was left in the vast and ill-fortified camp. His soldiers, tired of climbing mountains and forests, demanded that he take possession of the Tabaira. The voice of attention in the Tatar Sada, commander-in-chief, was silenced by his weariness and his desire to end the ceaseless war with one blow. With most of his warriors, Mangush crept up to the Tabaira and suddenly attacked it. Then, standing in ambush, Hagaraglai sent several horsemen to the Tatra camp by different roads and struck Mangush's army in the back. But he, being in a state of intense excitement, did not wish to lose the booty and ordered his reserve, also hidden near the camp, to join in the fight. From this Hagaraglai was much handicapped, yet he held out until the rest of the army came. Tatra ordered his men to take no prisoners, cut off the enemy's retreat route, and set the Tartars on a show of trepanness. Mangush and several thousand of his soldiers, seeking salvation, threw themselves into the waters of the raging river, but he alone, possessed of incredible endurance and physical strength, was able to reach the other saving bank. He rushed into Baglash, and Tatra with his army followed him. In the half-destroyed camp only Zabir with his 2,000 Taraklians remained. He and the 3,000 surviving Chumaks were to bury 5,000 of our fighters, 2,000 Chumaks and 15,000 Tartars. Mangush's attempt to prevent the Tatra from invading Baglash failed. Tatra followed almost on his heels, and the appearance of Mangush in Baglash without an army only caused a terrible panic. All the Tatar garrisons fled from Baglash to Juchi, who received them but disarmed them, so that the army of Tatra passed unmolested through Baglash and passed to the rear of Subjay. Inspired by the defeat of Mangush, Chilwan attacked Subiatai with his last strength, and he, fearing to be pinned between the Arakitai and the AK Bulgarians, began to retreat towards Orkhon in Mongolia. Finding that a Tatar commander left without an army ceased to be a commander, Subiatai did not hold even at Karakoram, and the army of Tatra, joining with the army of Chilwan, occupied without a fight the capital of the Altaic state of Timur. Yumran, who was then at Mankurt, Mandapgobi in Mongolia, was overwhelmed by the news of the fall of Karakoram and immediately agreed to Tatra's demand to end the war against Arakitai and Tangut. Jamak, who fought in Chilwan's army, dedicated the following mocking verses to this war: "The ravens decided to capture the treacle, and it was the slaves who contrived to raise their master's hand by nature. What reward will Mayananda give for this?" These verses made Timur very angry, but he could never get through to Jamak. As he was returning to his homestead on the shore of Lake Baikal, Jamak, a little dazed, unexpectedly stumbled down an embankment and fell with his horse into a precipice. He was an excellent commander of the Pribaikal convoy, and was replaced in that post by one of his sons, Kulyug Vitiaz. According to the Treaty of Karakoram of 1209. Tatra surrendered to Juchi, the Bulgars' loyal friend and ally, the AK Bulgarian districts of Baglash and Kalgan, because he had no way of holding them, but the remaining Bulgarian lands in the Altai, here Central Asia from Baikal to Sedmaraki, remained for AK Bulgar. Juchi became very powerful and ruled his kingdom so independently that Timur brought Tuguchur's, Genghis Khan's son-in-law, army of 30,000 men into Ulangur, Juchi's kingdom in western Mongolia, to prevent the disarmament of the Churlat army. But formerly Tuguchar was led as deputy war minister in the Alanga government. Ours used to call Juchi Alambatar himself. In 1216, when, on the orders of the Labatans, 70,000 Kortijaks, Suzdalites, of Tiljurgi, Yuri the Fool, Yuri Vvolodovich, and 300,000 Kharezmians, and Turkmen simultaneously attacked AK Bulgar, Tuguchar, on the orders of Timur, carried out a barbarian attack from the territory of Alanga against the AK Bulgar provinces of Tubjak, Kazakhstan, and Bisu, eastern Siberia and the Far East. By this, Timur wanted to discredit Juchi in the eyes of the Bulgarians and to get a pretext to liquidate the dangerous for the Churlat's power of Juchi. But Juchi kept his composure, and with his corps of 3 Tumen, 30 Hilds, struck at the rear of the Kharajim of Jalaleddin, son of the Khwarezm Shah Mohammed, who were besieging Seraituba. The army of Tatra defending Seraituba also struck the Kharajim from the north, and Jalaleddin chose to retreat. Tatra then immediately went to the aid of Hagaragle, who barely held off the advance of the Kharajim and the Turkmens of Sarshin, and the Kharajim were defeated here as well. The Labuatites became disillusioned with the Kharajim Shah Mohammed and ordered Timur to take Karakitai and Kharajim. In 1218, Kuchluk, on the orders of the Labuatans, surrendered his kingdom of Karakitai to the Tatars without a fight. After them, in 1219, on the orders of the Labuatans, also without a fight, Shah Mohammed surrendered his kingdom of Kharajim to the Tatars. Gabdullah Chelbir could not believe this and asked Jalaleddin to give him the necessary explanations, but Jalaleddin said nothing to our ambassador. In 1226, the Tiljurgis and the Tatars simultaneously attacked Great Bulgaria from the west and the east. The governor of Tubjak, Kichimorgan, treasonably went over to the side of the Tatars, and the whole of Tubjak was engulfed in the flames of an endless and cruel war. But the greatest AK Bulgarian Sada Tatra, also called Jangoli, could no longer help his country. He died in 1220. In 1209, before the actual withdrawal of Tatra's army from Altai, Timur asked him, "O Kulyug, hero, tell us which Bulgarian clan are you from?" "My parents are of the tribes of the Markbashi, Estonians, and the Kumi, Komi, belonging to the northern Bulgarians, whom other Bulgarians call Karel, Finns," Tatra confessed without any guile, struck by such attention to him. And after a moment's reflection he added, "On my father's side I am a descendant of Talyang, Gatilla." Then Timur heaved a sigh of relief and it all became clear to him. From that day on, Genghis Khan, whenever he wanted to praise one of his commanders, would say to him, "Goral, Goral." Thus he pronounced the word Karel, which was incomprehensible to him, and so he called Tatra in his memoirs. The end of Tatra Dastani, of my grandfather Galimkart, Old Galim, writes Galim Zadi. NT 4, 328 to 336. When disturbances began under the Churlats, by order of the Ulug Khan, all the Bulgarian towns were destroyed in Kaiman, and the vast country was restored to the state of savagery. In 1226, Mir Ghazi wanted to send 50,000 Bulgarian Bahadurs to the aid of the Tanguts and Nankai, but the unexpected and simultaneous attacks on AK Bulgar from four sides 70,000 Kortjaks, Suzdalites, 30,000 Janagaligians, Novorodians, 100,000 Mihan, Azerbaijani, Turkmen, and 60,000 Churlat Tatars, Tatar Mongols, stiffened these Bulgarian forces. Tangut was defeated, but at the siege of Nunja, Ninxia, Yumran, Genghis Khan received a mortal wound and soon after went to hell. The last Tangut emperor killed by the Churlat Tatars, Burjan, who in his youth studied at the school for princes, legendized as a Kale Kashan, Wigi, managed to transmit in 1205 the drawings of the Tangut flamethrowers, stonemasons, and spearmen, which greatly helped the Bulgars in the war with the Churlat Tatars.